Is Israel conducting a genocide in Gaza? Well, the quick answer is no, but take a look at this clip from Douglas Murray over here, who really goes through the rationale behind why the claim of genocide is complete nonsense. So we'll watch this clip together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
As I said earlier, I think my favorite book from you since The Strange Death of Europe. Absolutely brilliant. Millions of people in the West and Muslims and Western Muslims believe three things, and you talk about this in the book. Gaza is a concentration camp, Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians, and they believe that tens of thousands of children have been murdered by Israel over the last couple of years. Is there any accuracy to any of these 3 points? And how does one sort of persuade people who genuinely and sincerely believe that? Because I mean, you've probably interviewed them. I've interviewed people, left-wing people, radical Muslims, who are incredibly emotive and genuinely believe that Israel is committing some kind of genocide here.
The first thing is they should read my book, or any other book which is by somebody who's seen what I've seen, spoken to the number of people I've spoken to, survivors, families of hostages, people who witnessed Hamas's barbarism up close, and been with the IDF during their operations in Gaza and Lebanon to try to fulfill the 2 aims of Israel's war, which are to return the kidnapped hostages, many of whom are still in captivity as we speak, and secondly, to destroy the leadership of Hamas. And make Hamas effectively operationally incapable. To take just those 3 lies which you cite, anyone who knows what Gaza was like before October the 7th, 2023, it's a very different place now because of the choices that Hamas made. Anyone who knows anything about Gaza could tell quite a lot of tells of why Gaza in no way resembled a concentration camp, which is a deliberate smear which people use because they know that if you use the accusation concentration camp against the Jewish state, you will particularly wound and upset Jews. That's why they do it. That's why they don't say, you know, it's a shame that, well, no, it's a shame that more food trucks can't come in, as it was. There's no shortage of food trucks, but that they can't come in without having to be searched because they have to be searched because of missiles. But we understand, or something like that. Gaza's population almost doubled from the time that every Jew was torn from their homes by the IDF in Gaza in 2005, and the whole territory given over to the Palestinian peoples, who then voted in Hamas. In the time from 2005, when every Jew was made to leave Gaza, because everybody seems to agree that one of the natural things for the Palestinians is that they can't have a single Jew near them. That seems for some reason to be a completely acceptable opinion. From the time the withdrawal in 2005 to October the 7th, 2023, the population of Gaza almost doubled. Even the people who make the outrageous claims about Israel's military actions and military response to the 7th of October, they can't reconcile in their heads the lies they're saying. For instance, they will say that the population of Gaza is disproportionately young. That does happen to be true, but you'll notice that you have a choice between those 2 things, don't you? Either it's a concentration camp, or it's a place where the population doubles and people are able to have a lot of children. You will notice that there was no doubling of the population in Bergen-Belsen in the 1940s. So it's one of the many reasons why it's totally obscene. The other reason is, by the way, that anyone who knows anything about Gaza between 2005 and 2023, and again I give many examples in the book, will know that actually, compared to the rest of the region, other Arab countries in the region, other Muslim countries in the region, Gaza was pretty much like some of them actually living standards were higher in Gaza than some of their neighbors, and they had shopping malls and swimming pools and leisure centers and marketplaces and actually the strip along the beach was really a rather nice bit of town. Billions of dollars were poured into Gaza in international aid from other people in the region, by British taxpayers, American taxpayers, EU taxpayers, and others. billions of dollars were not poured in to Auschwitz in the 1940s. It's like, this is just obscene. You'll notice that people were not driving luxury cars around Treblinka in the 1940s. This is obscene. But as I say, people make that accusation because they want to wound the Jewish state. Concentration camp is a very good way to do that, by claiming that. The other two examples you give of disproportionately the death of children, certainly children will have been killed in fighting in Gaza, certainly. We cannot rely on the Hamas numbers which they give out, which are the only numbers that can be, which any of the Western media decide can actually be used. But the best analysts of the war from outside have said that in the whole history of warfare, it's highly unlikely there has been a war before where in such a dense area, which is completely booby-trapped, was completely booby-trapped, and much more by Hamas in the 18 years they ran Gaza, that in very few, if not no occasions in the history of war, has civilian casualty to terrorist death been so low that it is roughly one terrorist to one civilian dead. Now, if that means it's 15,000 Hamas terrorists killed, maybe that means there are 30,000 Palestinians killed. This is terrible, terrible. But this is the war that Hamas started, and they didn't have to start the war. And the accusation that Israel would be deliberately targeting children is another of the outrageous smears. The third one you gave, just remind me quickly, was...
The second one was genocide. The third one was the
genocide, again. Genocide was what Hamas attempted on the 7th of October, when 4,000 of their terrorists, along with Islamic Jihad, broke into Israel, went into innocent people's homes and burned them alive in their homes, and went through the Nova music party of young people simply dancing in the early hours of the morning and raped and murdered their way through that party. That was an attempted genocide. By the way, Hezbollah were meant to do the same thing from the north, and thank goodness Hamas and Hezbollah weren't able to communicate. It's something I go into in the book. Weren't able to communicate to make sure that it was coordinated. If it had have been exactly the same thing would have come from the north. As it was, Hezbollah didn't have the advance notice and they just joined in with rocket fire from the 8th. But the genocide was what Hamas and their allies want to commit. Genocide is what their backers, the Iranian Revolutionary Government in Iran, say they want to carry out. If Israel had wanted to commit genocide in Gaza, I mean, first of all, they wouldn't. Secondly, they could have done if they'd have wanted to. If they just simply wanted to kill everyone in Gaza, the Israeli Air Force could have gone in on October the 8th and done that. There would not be currently hundreds and hundreds of dead Israeli soldiers, reservists and others of your age and younger, Israeli soldiers killed in the line of duty because they were going through Gaza so carefully. If they'd have wanted to commit genocide, Israel wouldn't have lost all of these young men and women. They lost them because of the rules of war that they follow, that Hamas absolutely not only refuses to follow, but uses against them. But the interesting thing about all of these allegations is this. I say at one point in the book, there's a very, very interesting line that I borrow from a great Soviet writer, Vasily Grossman, which is, tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of. This held true, as Grossman says in the 1950s, held true for anti-Semites throughout history. And by the way, of course, I have to add the caveat, but it's true, not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. But when you hold Israel to double standards and different standards than you would hold any other country to, then yes, that's anti-Semitism. But Grossman's line, tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of, absolutely characterizes all of these things. The Hamas supporters in Britain and elsewhere support a movement that wanted to commit genocide, so they accuse the Israelis of genocide. They support people who slaughtered children in their homes on the 7th of October without mercy, with glee, with delight. so they accuse Israel of wanting to kill children. They want a concentration camp for the Jews. They want the annihilation of the Jews. They love the idea of the annihilation of the Jews. So they accuse the Jews of setting up a concentration camp. This rule holds absolutely consistently. What are the other things they accuse of? Just look the other month, there are a bunch of weird left-wingers in Britain and elsewhere who started sending out this slurry of stories online claiming that the Israeli defense forces in Gaza had been raping women in the Shifa hospital, I think it was, which is a Hamas command headquarters. And they say, aha, the IDF are rapists. You have spent the last 18 months supporting rapists. You spent the last 18 months denying rapes or glorifying rapes or supporting the people who carry out rapes, who GoPro their abuse of women on October the 7th, who record it, who broadcast it, who are proud of it. You support those people for 18 months and then you accuse the Israelis of raping? Every single time this rule holds. And the people who have been making these totally false allegations against the Israelis since October the 7th, and where they didn't on the 7th, and many did, they started on the 8th of October. Every time they have told us about themselves, the people who have marched through London week after week, who don't give a darn about anything else other than Jews never winning, those people make lurid accusation after lurid accusation against the world's one Jewish state because they accuse it of things that they themselves like and want.
You quote Vasily Grossman throughout the book, obviously an incredible writer who documented some of the worst crimes of the 20th century, which was a truly bloody, terrible century. And you write in the book, you saw protests around the world just after October 7th, immediately supporting what Hamas did, which is shocking.
The first ones in London were on the evening of the 7th.
Yeah. While the actual atrocities were still...
On the evening of the 7th, certain British left-wingers and Muslims couldn't resist going straight out onto the streets to celebrate, and we have much documentary evidence of it. And then on the 8th, they really got organized. And in Britain, they asked for their permits to protest against Israel. They asked for the permits on the 7th as the massacre was going on, and they turned out on the streets on the 8th as the massacres were still going on. These are sick people we have in our midst.
These are certainly sick people indeed. I think another interesting point that was brought up about the genocide claim is that here you have the people of Gaza, if they truly are being genocided, if that is really the intention. I do find it odd that out of all of the history of situations like this in the world, right, when there's a genocide happening, this is the first time where the populace that's living there is not only not encouraged to move, they're prevented from moving. Don't you leave that area. Don't leave Gaza. They've been assisted. They've been offered assistance to leave. There's been the Trump plan perspective of moving them somewhere else. All sorts of things. A lot of discussion about it, and the reaction is always, no, they have to stay. They have to be there. So which one is it? Is there a genocide happening? And if there is, why wouldn't you want to get these people out as soon as possible? This is the only time in world history that I'm aware of that such a thing has happened, that the international community is sort of forcing the inhabitants of the area to remain exactly where they are, not to find shelter anywhere else. The truth of the matter is that there is no genocide happening, as Douglas Murray very succinctly and clearly points out, but it's such a bizarre thing. It's the same people that are claiming genocide that are also screaming from the hilltops when anybody even suggests that the people, the inhabitants of Gaza, that they leave even temporarily. I don't know why it's such a contradiction of terms. I guess we'll never know. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.